Hey everyone, it is Ashley with STN's Crime and Paranormal. Today I am going to actually speak about a guy named Donald Peewee Gaskins. He was born in Florence County, South Carolina, March 13th, 1933. We're gonna speak about him. He is, well, we'll just jump into it and we'll talk about who he is. He was teased at a young age. He got the name Peewee because of his small stature. He was, as an adult, he was 5'4", 5'5", and he only weighed 130 pounds. So as you can imagine, as a kid, he was probably fairly small. So as an adult, that's about how tall he was. Growing up, all he knew was violence and rejection. At the age of 1, Donald, and this is reportedly had drank a bottle of kerosene, which caused him to have convulsions until he was the age of 3. Okay, so his mother, she was not interested in Donald at all. She had actually allegedly beaten, sexually humiliated him. The first time he actually heard his name was at his first court appearance. That was the first time he heard his given name, aside from Peewee. So, as you can imagine, as a kid, I mean, it's kind of sad. So it was also said that his mother was a sex worker and that she allegedly would sell Donald to her boyfriends and her clients for sexual abuse. So she had a husband and he also beat Donald, and Donald fought with kids daily. So many people would describe Donald as a con artist, as a great manipulator, street smart, but then some people would explain him as a keen sense of humor and friendly, but had an entertaining personality. So there's two sides of the spectrum there. He was a manipulator, con artist, he had street smarts, but at the same time, people also looked at him as having a keen sense of humor and being friendly and just having an entertaining personality, which I guess if you're a good manipulator, you're going to be able to show people that kind of side of you. So let's get into what led him into his crimes. At the age of 11 years old, he quit school. At 11. Can you imagine quitting school at the age of 11? I couldn't imagine that. He began working on cars in a local garage after he had quit school. So he ended up meeting 2 boys by the name of Danny and Marsh. They were about the same age as Donald, and they were about the same age as Donald. So they called themselves the Troubled Trio. Okay. So the Troubled Trio, they burglarized homes. They picked up prostitutes. They raped little boys and threatened them so they wouldn't tell the police. This was all being 13 years younger. That's crazy. The trio ended up breaking up when Donald was 13 years old. And the reason why they broke up, this is unbelievable. The reason why they broke up is because they were caught gang raping Marsh's little sister. Which, if you remember when I said the boys that he met was Danny and Marsh, they gang raped Marsh's little sister. So the boys were punished, and they were punished until they bled by their parents. Shortly after that, Danny and Marsh moved away. After that incident, Danny and Marsh moved away. I can only imagine. I cannot imagine what that poor girl had went through. And the fact that your brother was even in on it, it's terrible, terrible. And the parents, I could not imagine how horrified the parents were in this either. So after they moved, Danny and Marsh moved, Donald still continued down a path of trouble. He was still burglarizing homes, but he was doing it by himself. He was, he was just terrible. Terrible. At such a young age, too. Can you, wow. Anyways, in 1946, a girl that Donald knew had came into her house while he was burglarizing it. Sorry, guys. The girl hit Donald in the head with an axe. But somehow he managed to get away from her, and then he hit her in the head and arm before he left home. And let me retract that statement for a minute, because I'm actually not 100% sure that she hit him in the head. She did hit him with an axe. He hit her on the head. So the girl survived this attack. Donald was then arrested and convicted for assault with a deadly weapon and intent to kill. He was then sent to South Carolina Industrial School for Boys until he would turn the age of 18. So this was a reform school. He did not have it good at the reform school. Upon arrival, he was almost immediately attacked because of his size. Attacked and raped because of his size. Peewee. There was someone called the boss boy that he would have sexual relations with for exchange for protection. Yikes. He also spent a lot of time attempting to escape his attackers. Donald had also claimed that at one time he was raped by 20 other inmates. And that had went on for 5 years at this reform school. 20. So he then escaped the reform school and he joined the traveling carnival. As he was joining this traveling carnival, he then married a 13-year-old girl. Okay, while he was in the traveling carnival, and decided he would return to reform school to complete his sentencing after he had married this girl. So he was then, after he completed his sentencing, he was then released from the school and he started working on a tobacco farm. He soon got involved with insurance fraud. Okay, this is just another crime that he got involved with. He carried out this insurance fraud by burning local farmers' barns for a fee. Eventually, others would catch on about his involvement with the barns being burned. So that was another crime of his. So he had another crime in a panic because his employer from the tobacco farm, decided to question him one day about the barns that had been caught on fire. Because like I said, people were starting to catch on to his involvement. So she decided to question him. When she did, Donald freaked out in a panic and hit the girl over the head with a hammer, splitting her skull. He got 5-year sentence in prison for assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. 5 years. 5 years. So let's talk about while Donald was in prison. This is where Donald committed his first murder. Okay. So Donald killed the most feared man in prison by the name of Hazel Brazel. He claimed that this was in self-defense. The reason why he did this was to try to become a power man. Okay? A power man is some of the most feared inmates in the prison. So Donald decided this would be enough to keep the other inmates off his back. So he killed Hazel Brazel, which was the most feared man in prison, to make himself the power man. He was found guilty of manslaughter and he got 6 months of solitary confinement. Okay? He did, however, become the power man. Figure them odds. So let's go to 1955. In 1955, his wife decided to divorce him. When he found out that his wife was divorcing him, Donald lost his mind. And he escaped from prison by hiding in the back of a garbage truck. And this guy seriously gets away with a lot. And yes, I can see the con artist and the manipulator in him. After that had happened, he got married again, but the marriage didn't last very long. It lasted about 2 weeks, I believe. It was about a 2-week marriage. So with the divorce from his first marriage, a short 2-week marriage with the second wife, Donald then got involved with a third lady by the name of Betty Gates. Okay. Donald arrived back at the hotel and was shocked. And the reason why they were at the hotel is because Betty Gates and Donald fled to Tennessee to bail out Betty's brother. Okay, but when Donald arrived back at the hotel, he got a shock of his life, because that is where he found out that Betty's brother was actually her husband and had also escaped recently. So the police arrived at the hotel, finding out that Gaskins was an escaped convict. So here he was sent back to prison with an added 9 months for aiding the escape of a prisoner. His rap sheet's ridiculous. So August 1961, Gaskin was finally released from prison and decided to move back to South Carolina. To prison with an added 9 months for aiding the escape of a prisoner. 1961. Gaskin was finally released from prison, and he decided to move back to South Carolina. Well, of course, having a long criminal history, he was still unable to stay out of trouble. He was still burglarizing homes. He somehow avoided arrest by working with a traveling minister as his driver. What? This guy. 1962. He was arrested for statutory rape of a 12-year-old girl. Remember, he was born in 1933. Arrested for statutory rape of a 12-year-old girl. He somehow escaped to North Carolina in a stolen vehicle. There he met a 17-year-old girl that he ended up marrying. Although his 17-year-old wife, she ended up turning him in for statutory rape. And this is where he received another 6 years. But this time it was in the Columbia Penitentiary. So November of 1968, he made parole. And he vowed to never return to North Carolina again. So at this point, we're kind of, wondering, does Donald have a mental illness? Possible. And it does seem like he did, because here, Donald had described that he had feelings that would force him to do these crimes. Okay. So he was having these feelings that would force him to do these crimes. Either that's an excuse or he really had a mental illness. Either way, it's not right. In September of 1969, Donald was finally able to get relief for those feelings that he had. But it must not have lasted long, because he ended up picking up a female hitchhiker in North Carolina. So North Carolina. Okay. He became very angry with this woman when she chuckled at his propositions for sex. This is when Donald raped, sodomized, and tortured this woman. After he did this, he then went to the swamp to drown her body by attaching weights to her. So here is yet another murder. The feelings he had once said he had came back with a vengeance. And this is where he said these feelings were now his drive in life. These feelings were his drive in life. So by this time, Donald has mastered the skill of torture. He's mastered it. He would keep his victims alive for days. Occasionally, he would sever their body parts and eat them, often making the other victims watch him while he was eating, or making them join in eating the other victims' body parts. He was making his other victims watch him or join him in eating these body parts. Gaskin had a preference, though, when it came to his victims, and it was mainly only females. However, that made a turn, because between 1969 and 1975, investigators would soon find the remains of both boys and girls that were murdered along the Carolina highways. This, at this point, now meant that nobody was safe from Donald. Not boys, not girls, no ages, nothing was safe from Donald. He would call these murders his weekend recreation. This is what he did for recreation, guys. And as if he wasn't bad enough killing people he didn't know, Donald would also kill his acquaintances. Yeah, his acquaintances. One of these acquaintances, or somebody he knew, what happened to be somebody he was actually close with, which was his 15-year-old niece and her friend. So the murder of his niece and her friend, Janice Kirby was his niece, and she was only 15 years old. Her friend Patricia Ann Alsbrook was 17 years old whenever this crime had happened. How he did it. He lured the two to an abandoned house where he would attempt to rape them. But when he was unable to get this done, he beat the two girls to death because he was not able to rape them. Sick. Donald claimed that he had murdered nearly 100 people along the coast of the Carolinas. His reputation, some would say Donald was explosive, and others would say mentally disturbed. I'm going to say both. People in the town would try to avoid Donald. He did, however, have a few that liked him, which would turn deadly. Let's talk about Dorian Dempsey. Okay, so Dorian Dempsey. She was a mother of a 2-year-old baby girl. She was also 8 months pregnant with her second child. She considered Gaskin a friend of hers. So as she was leaving town, she got a ride from Donald to the bus station. However, the bus station is not where they went. He took a different turn. He took a turn into a wooded area where he raped and killed Dorian Dempsey. Also, raping and sodomizing and killing her 2-year-old baby girl. Afterwards, he cut off and ate a portion of Dorian's leg. So he was also a cannibal. He was cannibal. Gaskins then buried both Dorian and her daughter together. At the age of 42, which was in 1975, which really was not that long ago, Donald had consistently been killing for the past 6 years. He was working alone by himself to help him from to avoid being caught. After murdering 3 people when their van had broke down on the highway, Donald needed some help this time. So this is where Donald called an ex-convict by the name of Walter Neely. So Donald needed Walter to drive his victim's van to his garage so he could paint and sell the van. So that's where Neely got in with Donald. So Walter Neely and Donald Gaskin. Donald was also a hired hitman. So a lady by the name of Susan Kipper paid him $1,500 to kill her ex-boyfriend, whose name was Silas Yates. 2 men by the name of John one being John Owens and the other being John Powell, were the ones who communicated the arrangement of Silas's murder. So on February 12th, 1975, Diane Neely lured Silas out of his house by telling him she was having car issues. This is where Donald kidnaps and murders Silas while both the Johns watched. All three of them buried Silas. So Donald Gaskins was eventually blackmailed. It took a turn because Diane Neely and her boyfriend blackmailed Donald, asking for $5,000 to keep quiet. So they're asking for $5,000 for them to keep quiet from Gaskins. And no more Diane Neely. There was more killings. This guy. Donald killed 13-year-old Kim Gaskins because she rejected him. 13 years old. So she rejected him and he killed her. Okay, so two locals from the town robbed Donald. That set him off. And he killed them and buried the two with others in his own private cemetery, where he had many others buried. He had a private cemetery for the people that he killed. He buried in this private cemetery. When he killed Kim Gaskins and she became, when she was missing, this is what arose suspicions. Police began to become suspicious of Donald. So they did a search on his apartment, finding clothing that had been worn by Kim Gaskins. Donald was then indicted for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. While waiting for the trial, Neely then spilled and took the police where Donald had his private cemetery. Now we're talking about Walter Neely, not Diane Neely. All right. So here's what they found in the cemetery. They found several bodies in Donald's private cemetery. They had found Sellers, Judy, Howard, Diane Neely, Johnny Knight, Dennis Bellamy, Dorian Dempsey, and her 2-year-old child. On April 27th of 1976, both Donald Gaskins and Walter Neely were charged with 8 counts of murder. Neely, the one that sang like a canary. So, in May 24th of 1976, the jury convicted Donald of Dennis Bellamy's murder and was sentenced to death. However, to try to avoid any additional death sentences, he then confessed to 7 more murders to try to avoid the death sentence. So, in November of 1976, unfortunately, the Supreme Court somehow ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional and converted his death sentence to 7 consecutive life sentences. This was a man that took several people's lives, and it's unconstitutional to give him the death sentence. I'm not sure where everybody else stands on that, but I fully believe in the death penalty. So in 1978, Donald's death penalty was restored. Donald was then caught and found guilty for being hired and paid to murder his fellow inmate by the name of Rudolph Tyner. He used C4 to murder Rudolph. I'm not sure how they sneak all this stuff in, but I guess this was back in 1970, so maybe it was different than it is now. Because of this conviction caused him to receive the death sentence. So Donald tried to avoid being put in the electric chair by confessing to other murders. This would make him the worst killer in South Carolina if all these murders he confessed to happened to be true. One of the murders Donald confessed to was rejected. They rejected a murder that he confessed to. Her name was Peggy Catino. Because prosecutors had already charged and sentenced a man by the name of William Pierce to life in prison for this murder, they decided to reject Donald's confession. Rejected it. So we'll get to the day of his execution. On the day that he was to be executed, Donald tried to cut his wrist to try to avoid the electric chair. He was trying to avoid this chair at all costs. He wanted this to happen on his time, okay? So this was, of course, a failed attempt, and Donald was stitched up and placed in the electric chair. On September 6th of 1991, Donald was pronounced dead by electrocution. Nobody really knows how many people Donald had actually murdered at this point. They were unable to get information for all of the bodies, sadly. Donald had many names. So Donald Gaskin had the name of the meanest man in America. He had the name the Redneck Charles Manson, the Hitchhiker's Killer, and Junior Parrot. In the end, Gaskins had claimed to have killed 110 people, but only 15 of them were confirmed. 110 people is how many he had claimed to killed, and 15 of them were able to be confirmed. So this is the serial killer of Donald Peewee Gaskins. This is going to wrap up today's podcast, and the next one we'll get up. So thank you for joining this podcast with me today and for listening to the serial killer by the name of Donald Peewee Gaskins. You guys have a great night, and I will see you on the next episode.